when our study was over, one of the most striking repeated comments by volunteers was the way in which the experience seemed more real than real, more real than everyday reality. So I started thinking about, well, if that were the case, how could you explain it?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Houston Ensemble podcast. We're joined today with Dr. Rick Strassman. This is somebody who maybe some of you have heard about, maybe not. If you have not, I highly encourage you check him out, but also listen to this podcast because there's going to be a lot of great material shared in it. Armin and I are big fans of Dr. Strassman's work. Obviously, we've read a lot about it. We've read the book, watched the documentary, etc. We're talking about the spirit molecule here. So, Dr. Strassman, thank you so much for coming on today. And
sure, nice to be on your show.
Thank you. So glad to finally have you. It's been a long time coming, as you know. But let's just start off very clearly. What inspired you to research dimethyltryptamine?
What inspired me? Well, there are a couple inspirations. One was my long-term fascination with chemistry and with fireworks. Bright colors, excitement, those kinds of things. In fact, I started college as a chemistry major, thinking I would start my own line of fireworks. But I was persuaded instead to pursue medicine. I kind of got the last, laugh in that regard because I kind of just, transferred the fireworks into the mind.
It is widely known that the tobacco and diet industries lobby governments with scientific propaganda for years until proven guilty in court. The artificial treatment of our water is the next corporate deception.
For example, virtually every nation in Europe has rejected the use of artificial fluoride. International studies since the 40s have repeatedly shown that endocrine and neurological effects increase after repeated consumption, even at the levels accepted by U.S. government.
Epic Water Filters is the most thorough industry-grade filtration system that Houston Ensemble has ever used. They reduce heavy metals upwards of 99.5%, such as lead and mercury, bacteria like E. coli, and poisons like chromium, nitrate, and fluoride.
Join us in our journey to living a toxin-free life and get your Epic Water Filter using discount code Houston Ensemble, lowercase, one word. That's Houston Ensemble, lowercase, one word, for 20% off your Epic Water Filter.
Rather than externally. In college, I was interested in chemistry and was especially interested in the possible chemical underpinnings of spiritual experiences. This was in California in the early 1970s, big influx of psychedelic drugs and also Eastern meditation practices. And I was impressed with the commonality and descriptions between the effects of certain meditations and the effect of psychedelic drugs. The colors and the visions and the voices and the ecstasy and the new insights, those kinds of things. So I started, with an investigation of the pineal gland, about which not much was known back then, because there was some data suggesting that melatonin, the main hormonal product of the pineal, was potentially psychedelic. So we studied that. That was my first kind of independent research, project. There wasn't much known about melatonin at the time. This was the early 80s. It turned out to be the case that melatonin was only sedating. But by then I'd learned about DMT, which is also produced in the human body. It's quite psychedelic. It had been studied previously in human research. And I had my own experience with DMT around that time. So I switched, gears from the melatonin work to the DMT work. And I was interested in, determining if, DMT was inherently spiritual. If you just, gave DMT to people at a high enough dose without any coaching, with no preparation other than, some description of the time course, and that you would feel like you'd left your body. But other than that, we didn't really talk up any specific experience other than the individual's own experience. Go in there, keep your eyes open and describe the effects to us once you come down. So I was thinking if DMT administration replicated certain features of spiritual experience, that would support a role for naturally occurring DMT in those naturally occurring states like dreams or NDEs or mystical states.
When talking about this, it's almost like thinking about it is a trip. I don't even know where to start, but I was going to say this. Do you think we're any way in shape or form closer to understanding whether we are actually experiencing shared hallucinations of some sort, which would be extremely implicative, or if we're, strictly dealing with a chemical phenomenon that's more or less subjective to the user?
Well, how would you tell? How would you know one way or the other?
I guess if you put, let's say, 30 people in a room and they all took this either intravenously or, through some other means, apparatus, and in silence, if they were able to discern similar entities, objects simultaneously without much communication, would that be indicative of that? Or maybe are everyone's brain routers hooking up together somehow, and therefore the illusion of a shared experience is there? I don't know. What do you? You've done much more work on this in this regard. Do you think there's any way to tell?
Well, yeah, the fact that the brain makes DMT and concentrations are as high as those for serotonin and dopamine. It may it may turn out to be the case that there's a DMT neurotransmitter system in the mammalian brain. In which case, you'd have to wonder what it's doing there. And one speculative avenue is to think about that. DMT is mediating our sense of everyday reality. And when concentrations go up, then things get pretty psychedelic. And, when they go down, things would be the opposite, so to speak. So I've speculated kind of fancifully, that DMT is the endomatrix. It's the substance which is maintaining this shared consensus reality, which everybody is partaking in. There's no way to tell right now if that's true or not. I suppose one thing you could do, and is being done, is to develop animals which do not produce any DMT, to inhibit the enzyme or to block the gene. Wow. Well, to knock out the gene, which is responsible for the enzyme that synthesizes DMT. That's turning out to be difficult to do. And even if those animals looked either completely normal or completely different, you really wouldn't be able to put that hypothesis to the test without human studies. And you can't really knock out the DMT synthesizing enzyme in humans. That would be pretty unethical. But you could develop perhaps antibodies to DMT, which would work for a brief time, or some pharmacological blockader of DMT effects in humans. Which would also be difficult, because the receptors that DMT is activating are not specific to DMT, serotonin receptors. So you'd be blocking a number of other things at the same time. The shared hallucination thing is interesting. People who drink ayahuasca together as a group sometimes describe shared visions or even shared things in the external world. Charlie Grobe, a colleague at UCLA, did a study with ayahuasca. studying an ayahuasca using Brazilian church in the 90s. And he and Jace Calloway, another colleague who's I'm in Finland now, drank ayahuasca. They were in a group, and Charlie opens his eyes, and there's this huge raven sitting in front of him, and he turns to Jason and he said, "Do you see that?" And Jason nodded. So they were having a shared hallucination of a big raven. Nobody else was seeing it at the time. So that's obviously an interesting phenomenon. But whether we're living in a DMT hallucination or not, number one, it's hard to tell, and number two, you have to think about whether it make any difference with respect to how you would live your life. I mean, there still seems to be cause and effect in the DMT world. There's the passage of time. There's the existence of space. So you would still be responsible for your actions, and I think it would still be incumbent upon you to be as good a person as you could.
Wow, when you were doing the research for the spirit molecule, it was a little while ago that I read this, so you may have to correct me on some things, but it sounded like some of these people were having experiences that were just out of this world to an extent that they're even, frightening, a lot of frightening ones. Maybe, I think there was maybe one about, like, was it being raped by an alien?
Well, yeah, one of our volunteers was kind of a love and light fellow, permed, curly, long hair, tie-dye shirt. He'd only taken MDMA before. Oh. And, everything was groovy. Everything was cool. He worked at a natural food store, and he really didn't have any, sense of his own shadow, dark side, negativity, things like that. So yeah, I mean, he was just, blindsided, by his first big DMT experience. He was anally raped by crocodiles pinned below them or under them. Yeah, he couldn't move, couldn't speak, was totally terrified. Yeah, so there was that. There was another experience. Some fellow was struggling a bit with depression, and he had a very depressive, paranoid, claustrophobic kind of experience. His depression returned, but thankfully it cleared up quickly with some intervention, therapy, counseling. Somebody else got depressed again, a recurrence of their depression. It was also short-lived. He got back on antidepressants. So it's DMT is a very powerful drug. And even with our careful screening and preparation and integration and support, there were still some adverse effects. Nevertheless, they were brief, time limited. They responded to not too intensive interventions. The person with the experience of anally being raped by crocodiles, we excused him from the rest of the study, obviously. And he came in a few times for follow-up, recompensated rather quickly, stopped using drugs, obviously. Moved to California, got a job at a health food store, was pretty happy afterwards. So when people are talking about decriminalization and legalization and increasing access and things like that, it's important to keep in mind that these are not benign drugs. I mean, right. They're very powerful. You need to know what you're taking. You need to know what you're getting into. You need to be careful about your own preparation and stack the deck in your favor. You want to optimize the set, which is your own state, in the setting,
Mhm.
which is the environment and especially the people that you take psychedelics around.
Yeah, and to go along with that, we had, maybe you're familiar with him, we had Dick Kahn, who wrote these books called DMT and My Occult Mind. Now he's not,
Oh, right.
yeah, they're more just daily entries of his DMT experiences, and there are a lot. And it seems that, I'm getting to my question here, it seems that he thinks of it as potentially truly another entity, another dimension, another something, an other. But then something that you just said made me think, but what do you think? Is it also, this chemical that's, in this other guy's experience showing him his shadow self that he had not been in touch with, and it's not actually this other thing, or maybe it's a mixture? I just was curious if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, when our study was over, one of the most striking repeated comments by volunteers was the way in which the experience seemed more real than real, more real than everyday reality. So I started thinking about, well, if that were the case, how could you explain it? So I kind of, began with, looking at objective, models for entering into other realms of reality, other levels of reality, dark matter, parallel universes, those kinds of things. And that's really quite hard to test. And so instead I started to, look at other models for, the revelation or the uncovering or the disclosure of, previously invisible, but, parallel ongoing, levels of reality, subjectively, or at least within a religious tradition. Not necessarily physics, but more metaphysics. The spiritual traditions which are interested in altered states. Some of which share features with the psychedelic experience. So that was the model that I ultimately became more interested in, because of the importance that those traditions put or place on extracting information from those experiences, useful information in terms of understanding the nature of reality, and also useful information in terms of living a better life, both personally and communally. So there's two models of the spiritual experience within biology now. One is what's called neurotheology, which posits that basically it's your brain on drugs when you take psychedelics, or you pray, or you meditate, or you chant, or you fast. There are certain chemical reflexes which occur in the brain in response to certain stimuli, and the brain is configured that way in order to confer evolutionary advantage. You're more compassionate, you're more creative, you're more altruistic. The other model, so using that model, the brain reflex gives you gives you the impression of communicating with the divine. The other model, which I developed, later on through my studies of, metaphysics, is kind of turned on its head, which I call Theo Neurology, and that proposes that the brain is so configured in order to allow communication with an external divinity, an external spiritual world. So it isn't because of an evolutionary advantage, per se. It's, more of a, means of, God or the divine, communicating with us, which explains a lot of things which, may not make sense evolutionarily or rationally with respect, to the message of, certain spiritual traditions. So is it in, are the experiences, just, purely our brain on drugs? Is it, some outside communication, now, being made possible? I just don't think we can tell. And, so instead of the brain on drugs model or the, you're speaking with a real God model, I've opted, for a more, generic description, which is, psychedelics, reveal the, previously invisible. And, so that, bespeaks, the validity and the power of the term psychedelic, which means, mind manifesting or mind, disclosing, things, which you were not, previously perceptible or witnessable or apprehensible, now become, visible or apprehensible. You can see things and understand things or, witness things, which were, previously not, which were previously unavailable.
There's three things that come to mind, and we don't have to talk about all these three things, but as I'm listening to you explain, I'm reminded of the recent scientific obsession with consciousness. And it's not recent, but definitely the conversations popping up a little more often than I remember. And do we understand consciousness? Number one. Number two, we think about messing with human biology and see what we can turn on and turn off. Is that necessary? Are human beings perhaps innately capable of utilizing their own given biology to tap into certain energies? Is our bodies, our brain powerful enough to learn how to do that on its own? And then that leads me to another thought. And again, we don't have to speak on this, but I think MK Ultra and the program MK Ultra has had a huge, gigantic impact on people's attitude towards psychedelics in the past 6-7 decades. And what is the legacy of MK Ultra? Where does the line stop? Just recently, a few years ago, Johns Hopkins was still collecting data from anonymous users of psychotropics, even DMT, and asking these people if they can map out the region of space that they were in to see what they could actually tangibly get out of that. So I think there's a huge obsession with psychedelics in government and in government scientific communities, and that's undeniable. But so the question here might be, what do we need to know about consciousness, perhaps, to figure out what's going on to get closer to it?
Well, what is consciousness? I mean, it's kind of like pornography, like the Supreme Court justice, said a long time ago. He couldn't define pornography, but he knew it when he saw it. So I think with consciousness, it's kind of the same way. If you have consciousness or you don't. If you're conscious or not. But not being especially glib. Consciousness is consciousness. You are aware of things and yourself. That's probably the easiest definition. What is the origin of consciousness? What are the mechanics of consciousness? That's a lot more mysterious. There's this thing called the explanatory gap, which both philosophers and neuroscientists describe as the inability to link brain chemical changes with actually, or with actual subjective experience. There's no way at this point to understand how activation of serotonin receptors results in visions. You could map the biology, brain imaging, and you can map the subjective experience. But the one-to-one correspondence still is elusive, and both philosophers and neuroscientists aren't really sure about whether or not that'll ever be bridged. Speaking of Hopkins, they published a paper a week or two ago on, it was a survey study, where they asked people who tripped if they attributed consciousness to things which are normally not considered conscious, like animals and plants and even inanimate objects. And psychedelics seem to be associated with attribution of consciousness to a larger community, as it were, than previously. The danger in those kinds of studies isn't that, the question of what comes first. Is it the chicken or the egg? If you had an inkling or an interest in plants being conscious, or animals being conscious, or even inanimate objects possessing consciousness, and you trip and you say, oh, right, that's true, that animal is conscious, or that plant is conscious. There's danger in converting opinions or feelings into facts. Saying, oh, if you trip, you are now aware of consciousness, which exists in a lot larger arena, which wasn't the case before. So that isn't proof of consciousness in plants. It's proof of psychedelics magnifying, making more certain the belief that plants are conscious, but it doesn't mean that plants are conscious. You also asked about why can't we do it ourselves without drugs, let's say. Well, it's all drugs in a way, or it's all chemistry in a way. If you meditate, it changes brain chemistry. If you pray, it changes brain chemistry. If you take a psychedelic, it changes brain chemistry. So it's more the set and the setting. It's your intention. It's who you are, which will then channel the brain chemistry changes into the desired direction or not. So one of the advantages of doing it on yourself, or doing it by yourself, is you work on yourself in the meantime. Let's say you're a monk in a monastery. You're studying scripture, you're living a virtuous life, you're staying out of trouble, you're not you have a community of support. So if as a result of prayer or of meditation you have a psychedelic type or spiritual experience with psychedelic features, it confirms your training and your study, rather than being the goal of your training and study. You're validated in your pursuit of that path, and it's in a way just the beginning of your practice. Like, oh, okay, this is really true. What I've been studying and training, doing for the last 5 or 10 years is true, and you speed up your efforts. You intensify your practice as a result. If you just trip, like you want to have let's say a particular kind of experience, a mystical experience or a prophetic experience or an ego dissolving experience, and you study up on it for a bit, and you take a drug and you have that experience, it's quite a bit different. You have the experience as a goal, as the endpoint of taking a drug, as opposed to the experience occurring within a lot larger context. So even though the experience might resemble those experiences may resemble each other phenomenologically anyway, the feelings and the visions and the voices, the out of body experiences and whatnot, the context is quite a bit different, and the impact is quite a bit different. That's not to say that drug induced experience can't be helpful. It is clearly helpful, taking into account the right set and setting. If you're depressed and you take a psychedelic within a psychotherapy setting, it'll improve your depression or it'll improve your mood. But to conflate spiritual experiences just based on phenomenology, I think can be misleading. The MK Ultra, I've been interested in Charles Manson for quite a while, his use of psychedelics, and I read Helter Skelter a few years ago, and I'm currently reading The Family by Ed Sanders, and there's another book that somebody just turned me on to about Manson's involvement with MK Ultra. For your listeners that aren't familiar, MK Ultra was top secret CIA program to dose people unwittingly with psychedelics, and also to develop assassins and program killers under the influence of psychedelics. That never worked out, or didn't work out all that well, because the effects were too unpredictable. But still, it was nefarious. A lot of people had breakdowns. It wasn't very cool. I mean, there was no informed consent, or if it was informed consent, it was pretty sketchy. I think more of the danger now compared to back then, when this CIA and the government had their hands in nefarious studies or projects, is the commercialization of psychedelics, which is going on now. The government, mostly, it seems to me, is interested in the benefits of psychedelics. There could be some black ops stuff going on. Well, I'm not sure if I should really volunteer this information, but I will. Like after 9/11, I was pretty incensed, and I wrote to everybody. I wrote to George Bush, I wrote to Dick Cheney, I wrote to the CIA, I wrote to the FBI. I just wrote to everybody, and I said, if you want to use psychedelics as tools of interrogation, I volunteer. So it was interesting. The only person that wrote back was a representative from the CIA, and he called me actually, and he said, "Isn't that illegal?" And I just couldn't help but start, to laugh. Like, well, perhaps, but still, I mean, look what you guys did with MK Ultra. And so the guy said, "Oh, I'll get back to you." And obviously, I never heard back. But those weren't the especially useful tools of interrogation. The Army also was, developing psychedelics as biological or chemical warfare agents, which never really panned out either. There's a movie, Jacob's Ladder. It's about BZ, this drug called BZ. It's an anticholinergic drug like belladonna or scopolamine or atropine, completely psychotomimetic. And it's a movie about a platoon that was dosed in Vietnam with BZ, and obviously it was a real train wreck.
BZ.
Yeah, BZ. Z as in zebra.
Okay, gotcha.
Jacob's Ladder. It's a great movie. With Tim Robbins. I think there was a book. I'm not sure. But it was a great film. But dispersing the agents was complicated. There's wind and there's hills and things like that. So the Army gave up on that. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were not some black op operations going on. But still, I think it pales in comparison with a flurry of commercial interest in psychedelics. New compounds, especially new compounds. There's a novel by Philip K. Dick. Came out a long time ago, obviously, and it's called the Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, and it's about two competing psychedelics, for world domination. One is a Terran psychedelic, as I think it's called Can-D, and it makes people shrink into this space where they interact, with this doll called Perky Pat and her cohorts. They buy stuff and they take vacations and they play games together. It's all kind of trippy. It's like Barbie on acid, but you're living it. The other compound is called let's see, there's I'm blanking on the other compound. But it comes from another star system. And it's very dark. It's very strange. It's like a super psychedelic. You trip and you come down, and you're tripping again, and you're not sure if you've come down or not. It's like a horror story. I mean, it's one of the scariest things I've ever read. I suppose it affected me specifically, because of my interest. But still, I think with this mass commercialization of psychedelics, and who's got the coolest and the best and the most effective and the most entertaining or the most stimulating or the most out there psychedelics, I think we may be in store for some pretty strange, competitive, venture capital competition.
Yeah.
I'm very worried about that, Chad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm worried about that too. I think they're like, I forget actually what movie I saw, but it's always interesting to see. I'm just going to switch the camera here, coming right back. It's always interesting to see some of the futuristic psychedelics. And I was going to say, it's kind of to what you were saying about the Black Ops portion. Now, maybe this is comedy, maybe it's not, but if you're familiar with the guy Alex Jones, he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. And
oh, right. I've got an Alex Jones story.
he was talking all about how they're basically getting people, they're taking their body temperature down to death level, putting them in the DMT space or injecting them intravenously, keeping them in that space. I also read it's another book on more of the actual brain working. Oh my goodness. This guy lives in Japan. I feel like you'd probably have heard of him. And the book is written in kind of like this 8-bit art form. Darn it. I'm totally forgetting.
Are you thinking of Gallimore, Andrew Gallimore?
Andrew Gallimore, exactly.
Yeah, and his Alien Information Theory book.
Alien Information Theory, right.
And
he was talking about just
I know Andrew. Well, so we published a paper a number of years ago on theoretically, keeping somebody in an extended DMT state, like over the space of several hours. Theoretically, it could go on for days or weeks, I suppose. But extended over several hours. And there's a couple of groups, at least 3 right now, that are working on that. One is in London. The other's in London. There's one in Switzerland. So there's 3 groups that are working on developing an extended DMT state. So that could be what Alex Jones was talking about. A long time ago, Alex Jones, company called me and asked me if I would go on their show, and I hadn't heard of Alex Jones back then. And I did some online research, and he had just interviewed Charlie Sheen, who had gone manic. And he really embarrassed Charlie Sheen. And I looked at that interview and I said, I do not want to be interviewed by Alex Jones about DMT. So I said, no, thanks. And then a few weeks later, I saw, some clips, from Alex Jones show on DMT. And he was going off about, yeah, the elites are smoking DMT and the aliens are telling them what to do and how to accomplish their goal of world domination. So I thought to myself, I'm really glad I was not on Alex's show about DMT.
Can I say something about that?
That's funny.
So I'm pretty much thinking there's nothing that we could say that's going to surprise you too much. But without giving too much away, there is a weird aspect to psychotropics that isn't talked about much, and that is how it is used in occult circles. Because not only is there a retail obsession or growing obsession with psychedelics, there has for a long time been an obsession in occult circles, or people who like to do rituals that they think give them powers, or rituals that they think give them information, whatever. And decades ago, an individual who we've all heard of named Aleister Crowley went into a so-called strong hallucinogenic state using similar compounds. I believe it was DMT. And out of that experience, he sketched what he believed was an entity that he met in that realm. And that sketch is very famous. It's all over the internet. The sketch more or less looks like what we would think of a gray alien being. Large head, gray body, big eyes. And for Aleister, this entity was like a sagacious demon king of a sort that decided to appear to Aleister and confirm some of Aleister's ideas. So, is there any experience you've had with people from occultic circles, or any questions you've received from these individuals that may be interested in knowledge from this era?
Well, so one point is worth underlining. When you were describing this thing confirming some of Aleister Crowley's beliefs,
Right.
That's just it. That's what psychedelics do. They confirm your beliefs. So I think to impugn or to attribute intrinsic information to psychedelics isn't quite accurate. I think they are psychedelics. That's what they're called for a reason. They disclose or manifest what's in your mind. There's an Israeli psychologist, Ido Hartogsen, who's coined the description for psychedelics, calling them meaning enhancing. They enhance the meaning of things which are already in your mind. So in the case of Crowley, he had certain ideas. In the case of Charles Manson, he had certain ideas, and in his followers. And with psychedelics, it makes those ideas more real, more certain, more truthful, more meaningful. So the occult and psychedelics, the Hells Angels were the main distributors of LSD in the Bay Area back in the 60s. Charles Manson and his group used a lot of LSD. Ernst Jünger, who was a Nazi, pretty much militaristic, German guy from World War I, then World War II, used LSD with Albert Hoffman. Hoffman supported Jünger when Jünger was in dire straits, back in the 20s and 30s, the 40s. Yeah, so there's a book by Alan Piper, which is called "Strange Drugs Make Strange Bedfellows." And it's about how psychedelics are used in the occult, neo-Nazi groups, violence-prone individuals and organizations. So psychedelics are psychedelic. They work on your set and your setting. So if you want to be a more committed, neo-Nazi, take psychedelics and read Mein Kampf. If you want to be more in tune with occult energies and occult ideas and occult texts, take psychedelics and study occult texts and do rituals and perform magic. They'll pretty much do what you want. If you keep your finger to the pulse of the psychedelic literature, every couple of weeks there's a new thing that psychedelics do. Like I was describing that study from Hopkins about how the attribution of consciousness is enlarged through psychedelics. So that's just the latest example. The literature anyway. Well, the above board literature. Psychedelics change your metaphysical beliefs. They make you more progressive, nature appreciation, music appreciation. They improve your domestic relationships. They help your meditation. You name it. So in a way, they're placebos, they're panaceas. They basically do what you want them to. So that means that if you want to make the most of your psychedelic experiences, you need to set things up in that way. You need to prepare, you need to study, you need to fill your mind with the kinds of things that you want to become more the case in the future. So that could be for malignant purposes, or it could be for benign, beneficent ones.
I don't want to sound like an Alex Jones apologist here, but I mean, technically it's like, put your effort into whatever, take the drug, and then, you manifest that. So if you want to manifest, I don't know, world domination, maybe you could, maybe.
And I was going to say that's a good point too, because I think I've personally had an experience or multiple experiences where I do feel like these chemicals can maybe open up some sort of, or make you a little more receptive to something along those lines of an energetic portal,
right,
per se.
Are the stories of the berserkers, the frontline Visigoth and Viking tribes that would use mushrooms to basically lose their mind in the battlefield and go for it? But Chad, did you want to ask something?
Well, if you just look at the shamanic culture, the indigenous shamanic culture, not the one that gringos go down to and immerse themselves in for a couple of weeks. I have a friend who's a shaman in Ecuador. He's a European fellow who's lived there forever, and he came up to lead some ayahuasca retreats a few years ago, and he was telling us that 12 shamans in his state were murdered in the preceding year. So there's a lot of black magic, a lot of warfare. There's a lot of curses and counter curses and counter curses, which occur within the shamanic ayahuasca using community. Stephen Beyer, an anthropologist and an attorney, he wrote a book a few years ago, which is called "Singing to the Plants." And he's got an interesting quote in there. There are good shamans and bad shamans, but they're all bad shamans. And what he was speaking about is that the model for sickness and for healing, it all involves spiritual warfare. If you're sick, it's because you've been cursed by a shaman. And if you remove the curse, it goes back to the original cursing shaman who's angry and feels challenged, and then he curses you because you remove the curse from your patient, and kind of ad infinitum, and it ends in murder. This friend of mine said 12 shamans were killed in his state in a year. Psychedelics are not good, they're not bad, they're like nuclear energy in a way. I mean, they can be used for good, they could be used for for bad. So it's set and setting. It's your intention, is who you are, and it's why you trip, and who you trip around.
Wow. Well, I want to keep my word with the time, like we said. And Dr. Strassman, thank you so much for joining us. I think just for anybody who's listening, it's kind of funny. We've been trying to put this together for a while. We've all, either party has had something here and there, but we finally did it On lucky April 8th, my half birthday,
Oh,
my
happy
lucky number, infinity. Today's the day.
Mhm. Well,
It's
great.
an absolute pleasure. I mean, I think we could keep talking on and on. I mean, we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah.
I've barely mentioned anything about anything. So it's like, but we really appreciate
Are
it.
you going to be in Houston anytime in the future?
No plans now. Yeah. I
you
just
don't-
finished a book.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah,
what
I
you're
forgot
talking
to
about.
mention it. Yeah, I have a new book coming out in June. It's called the Psychedelic Handbook by Ulysses Press, coming out June. I just wrapped up the back cover just yesterday.
Awesome.
So it's pretty much done off my desk.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of a textbook for psychedelics. It isn't an advocacy book. It isn't the dangers of psychedelics. It's balanced. It's like, okay, they can do good, they can do harm. This is the way you optimize their effects. This is the way you minimize adverse effects. These are the drugs. These are what they do. These are how they do it. Legal stuff, microdosing, all those things. So it's kind of a one-stop shopping kind of book. If you want to learn about psychedelics, I think it'll be a good valuable resource.
Wow. Well, when that officially comes out or you get the link, I'll try and remember to ask you about that, and we'll put the link for that book in this podcast.
You can order it on Amazon already. If we can share
Okay.
screen, I can show you the cover.
Oh, let's check that out. Let me make sure you're allowed to share your screen. It can be kind of funky sometimes.
Yeah, I know it's not so easy to share screen with a guest. Let's see.
All right, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, let's see the one that came out yesterday.
Was there an artist who did the cover? Or
The
was it you?
publisher did.
Okay.
Um,
You're like, I had Alex Gray do it, the stock guy.
it's really different than an Alex Gray piece.
Good.
Let me see if this comes up
Change it
properly.
up.
No, this is the actual book. Back cover edited. What's the date?
Yeah. Even though it's full.
This is a pretty good version of the cover. Cover, there it is. Yeah, okay. So let's see if I can share screen with you all. Share screen. Oh, great. Yeah, so there it is.
Oh, cool.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. It's a little, friendlier than an Alex Gray painting.
Yeah.
The Alex Gray stuff can spook some people.
Mhm.
Oh man, that looks okay. I will be ordering that for sure.
Mhm.
We'll put a link to that so that everybody can see that.
You could order it on Amazon now if it's available. So it is practical, but theoretical too. I include stuff about metaphysics, and I include stuff about placebo and whatever. But it's mostly these are the drugs, these are what they do. These are how, or these are the ways in which we think they're doing what they're doing. But in fact, if you've got a minute, let me.
Oh yeah, we're all good on time, so as long as you're okay.
Yeah, I can show you the table of contents.
While you're doing that, if you don't mind, can you remind me what state you live in, or like even what city you live in?
Yeah, I'm in Gallup, New Mexico.
Okay.
Small town on the edge of the reservation.
Oh man, that's probably
Wow.
awesome.
It's a pretty amazing place. I've been here 12 years. So let me show you Psychedelic Handbook. There it is. So let me see if I can flip through the table of contents. What are psychedelic drugs? history, setting, studying human research, physical effects, psychological effects, near death and alien contact. The many names for psychedelics, why they matter. Are they psychedelics? Are they entheogens? Are they psychotomimetics? What are they good for? What are their risks? There's a couple of times I apologize in the book for being kind of a downer when it comes to saying there are risks, and these are what they are, and these are the forms the risks can take, and these are what you do about the risks and minimize them and how to get help and things. So I, don't, gild the lily. So there's how psychedelics work, the brain, networks, how psychedelics work the mind, Freud, Buddhism, metaphysics, beings. Then I, kind of go off on panaceas and placebos. Then I discuss, the classical compounds, LSD, psilocybin, DMT, MDMA. I had to bone up on MDMA and ketamine. Those are not what you would call, classical psychedelics, which are the drugs I'm most familiar with. So I had to, really get up to speed with MDMA.
Did you have to go out into the field and do a little research?
No, I just scoured the literature and spoke to some experts.
I'll just say very briefly, since it's on par with the subject, what I was referring to earlier, I had an experience that was, I guess, spiritually brought on by MDMA, where I truly think that I opened up some sort of energetic portal, which allowed some sort of energetic being to come through it. So, and I think ketamine is very similar in that way. So
right.
It actually has made me say, wow, you should be very careful about your intentions and about what you want to do.
Yeah, well, so in this, how psychedelics work the mind, I've got a couple of pages on the beings there. And then MDMA, ketamine, salvia, and then how to trip. That's the longest chapter of the book, is how to trip.
Dr. Strassman, have you ever heard of a forum entitled the DMT Nexus?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Microdosing and the law. Yeah, so one-stop shopping, like I said.
Wow, that's going to be awesome. That's like, it's reminding me of Tim Leary's book, way back, whatever that one was called, the psychedelic guide.
The psychedelic guide, or the
something like that.
I forget.
It's like analogous to that, but this looks like 1,000 times better, because I read that and it was like, it was something. This looks great.
Well, Tim's book, relied heavily on the Tibetan Book of the Dead,
right?
And the Bardos. So my book is a lot more like, I'm a clinical researcher, I'm a psychiatrist. So it's a lot. Well, it's coming at it from 50 years hence. What we've learned about psychedelics. It isn't like psychedelics are bursting on the scene. We know a lot about them now, and I've given a lot, and I've studied a lot, and it's a kind of like, if you don't really know anything about psychedelics, but you want to learn about them without really any agenda other than to just become educated. That I think will be the value of this book.
Wow. Well, we're going to put it in there, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're definitely going to stay in touch with you. And if I ever go to New Mexico anytime soon, I'll come say hello.
Yeah. Gallup's an interesting place. I just got an email from somebody saying, why do you live in Gallup? And it's like, how do you explain it? I've been here, 12 years. It's mostly Navajo. And it's really beautiful countryside. So I like living among the Navajo. I like the countryside. I've got a big house. It's quiet. I can write and study. It's Christian in a good way. I mean, they're really nice Christians here. So it's a good place to live.
There was a Native American gentleman in the Spirit Molecule documentary who I distinctly remember having a very profound experience, and he's sharing it.
Yeah, Patricio.
Yes. And I was struck by that because I know that we're all saying, the molecule can enhance what you already believe. But this will require another hour of I swear, and Chad would attest to this. There were moments I did feel like that. I was like, yeah, I was thinking that. That's nothing. That's like my projection. And other moments were like, that really came out of nowhere. I never fathomed imagining anything like that in my life.
Right. Yeah. One of my volunteers, said I could never have imagined this. The front material for my DMT book, The Spirit Molecule, it's a quote by Toomer saying, that we do not have the imagination to know what we are missing, or something like that. But at the same time, there is the unconscious that Freud discovered and worked on. So the unconscious is unconscious. I mean, I've been in analysis, on the couch, for days and days and weeks and years and years. The unconscious is unconscious. There's no way to access it until it's accessible. But when it is accessible, it's like, oh yeah, of course. But before that, it was completely inaccessible. So I think you can explain things using psychological principles, but at the same time, psychological principles are a fairly modern invention, and there's a longer history of other worlds which you tap into in altered states. So, I think the jury's still out about where that material exists. But time is running out. So, thanks for having me on. I'm glad we finally connected, and let's stay in touch.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Strassman. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.